Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Friends, we are going to take up another important unit which is on research methodology in sociology of sanitation. I think that is an important unit because it tries to give you the basic understanding about that how we can use or how we can practice the sociology of sanitation, and that way I think we try to see that this methodological understanding in that sense is going to be important. And as we all know that social science research is basically seen as an art as well as science, and it basically employs the skills and the knowledge which are needed to be researcher oriented and which are acquired through experiences. And these are the ways in which we try to see that how we are going to make the judgment about societal phenomenon and what are the broader reflexivity that comes into the picture. That of course is the whole idea. To quote the work of Thomas Kuhn, we try to see that the structure of scientific revolution, where he is trying to speak about that how the scientific disciplinarity in that sense is going to be important. And for that I think we have to speak about certain issues in that sense. The basic thing in that sense of course is that we have to speak about the paradigm in that sense which are necessary for defining the study in that sense, why we have to study, that is also equally going to be important, and how to study. I think these are certain things which we try to see are part and parcel of the research methodology. As we know that all the social scientists in that sense, they try to basically assume that how we are going to be scientific in our approach, but the most important thing in that sense is that what is the viability and what is the physical aspect of that, that is going to be important. So, we try to see that social science which basically is having its own nuances in terms of dealing with the people, with the society which is highly flexible in that sense, but still I think there are certain ways in which we try to practice certain issues. I think we have this whole discourse of modernity which we have discussed in the perspective on sociology of sanitation, and also we have the postmodern approach, and that way I think our canvas in that sense on research methodology is going to be quite wider. And for that I think the basic thing in that sense is that we have to speak about that how the traditional understanding of the social sciences are going to be important. Now, the point of course is that we have to see that how individual really exist, that of course is the basic thing that we have to uncover in that sense, and the basic idea in that sense is that we have to speak about the ontological individualism that is going to be important. And apart from that we have also to see that how the science is the study of the individuals, and there I think the basic concern is the methodological individualism, and that is going to be an important issue. And the third aspect in that sense of course is the rational choice theory, which basically tries to speak about that how the individuals in that sense makes their choice out of the available sources. So, virtually we try to see that the approaches which we try to deal with has the influence of the various aspect in terms of the situations, and also the actor has its own mobility in that sense, and he has his own mind. So, we have to see that the challenge of the social scientist in that sense to try to see the various perspective in that sense is going to be important. The basic purpose of the social science research which always is been seen as contested, but the basic idea in that sense of course is that we have to have an explanation of the social behavior, and our basic assumption in that sense of course is that how we can meaningfully and how we are going to see it in terms of reflexivity, and how we are going to see it in terms of objectivity, that the social behavior in that sense has to be enumerated. So, basically as a student of sociology of sanitation, the basic concern is that how we are going to put them into a specific phenomenon, and that is where I think the social science word in that sense has to be seen in terms of Newtonian mechanics. And the basic idea in that sense is that we have to put ourselves more valid and more scientific, more universal, and that of course is where we try to see our analogy with biology. I think we remember that in the perspective on social evolution, we have spoken about how Spencer has tried to use the social Darwinism in that sense, that is going to be closer to the biology in that sense, and then Parsonian framework where he was trying to emphasize upon the social system. So, we have to see that the issue of norms and the values in social sciences are going to play a crucial role, and the biggest challenge in that sense of course is that how we can be value free in the social sciences. And we have to see that whenever we try to speak about that, I think there are certain things which are coming to the picture. Basically, we try to speak about that how the social sciences in that sense is going to be meant for improving the conditions of the human lot. And for that, I think we try to see that there are different forms of research which we can undergo. At least I think we can broadly divide them into the three broader heads. One of course is the pure research, second of course is the applied research, and the third is the action research. So, these are the three broader research which we try to identify in terms of the forms of research. And in the pure research, when we are trying to deal with that, the basic understanding in that sense of course is that it has certain things which have to do with the theorization of the knowledge. And when we try to see the applied research, the basic idea in that sense of course is that theory which has to be put into practice. And I think when we try to speak about the sanitation, the basic idea in that sense of course is not the theory building, but also how we are going to use in our day to day life, that is going to be more important and meaningful. So, that way I think the applied research in that sense is going to be important, and we have to stress upon the question of why and why the things are there and what is the answer for that. So, we have to give an answer to why and what of the phenomenon, that is going to be important. And then I think we try to speak about the action research which basically believes on the fact that we are the leaders of change, and this change is to be incorporated in terms of the so called what we can say is trying to bring about the change in the social structure, social order. That of course is one important aspect which we have to deal with when we try to speak about the action research. So, sometimes if we try to see the sociology and sanitation in terms of a specific framework comes under, or it is a culmination of at least not only theorization, but it is more based on the so called action research, and also it is based on the understanding of what one can say is the applied research. So, virtually it is a combination of both applied and the action research which we try to see. And for that I think we have the various methodological frameworks and the methods which we try to deploy when we try to deal with the social science understanding. Now, we basically try to see that what are the different aspects which comes into prominence. At least I think we try to speak about the ontological base which is basically related to the real and the objective world. Now, what is the basic idea is that we try to see that the objective reality in that sense is something which cannot be changed or altered by the researcher. And then we have the epistemological knowledge or the epistemological aspect which is basically dealing with the possibility of the knowledge about that particular phenomenon and which already exists. And then comes the methodological base which basically refers to the technical instruments which are to be used to acquire that knowledge. So, I think these are the starting point for any research in that sense, either it is a question of ontology or it is a question of epistemology or it is the question of methodological understanding. And I think our concern in that sense of course is that how much we are in a position to really grasp into the ontological question, and if it is closer or exactly towards that ontological understanding, then our research appears to be more brighter in terms of objectivity. So, I think our classical sociologists or the classical social scientists in that sense who are basically emphasizing upon the issue of positivism, they basically try to speak about that Comte or Spencer for that sake or Durkheim, they all were speaking about how to make sociology as a science, and for that they basically has used and argued for the positivistic approach. And within that framework we try to see that they wanted to make it just like a physical science. But friends, I think when we try to speak about that, we know our limitations, and because our object of analysis is the human being. So, I think the variation in that sense goes differently. So, we basically try to see that there are certain aspects which have to be taken into consideration, and people like Max Weber, who had emphasized upon the fact that 100% objectivity in social science is not possible, and but we will try our best to make or to go for the value neutrality. That of course is another aspect. So, we have to see that methodologically we have to be correct in terms of understanding or reaching to the specific analysis, but the broader idea is that how we are going to achieve that. Now, let us say we try to speak about the notion of new positivism, which basically is trying to see things in terms of an assumption about the knowledge, which of course is context free, and we also try to see that how the different variables are to be seen across the time, and we have also to identify that what are the interpretative analysis which we have to take into consideration. Now, all these things in that sense are basically seen as an important aspect whenever we are going for the analysis of the social world, but the most important thing in that sense is that we have to speak about that how the data has to be presented, how it has to be made rich, and how it is going to be analyzed in that sense. And for that, I think there are different approaches which basically help us in understanding and uncovering the whole issue. And basically with regard to the sociology of sanitation, we basically try to emphasize upon that our focus should be more towards that how we can have more descriptive data, and that way I think the qualitative data in that sense is going to play a crucial role, because it is going to give a very meaningful understanding about the issue of sanitation. And for that, I think the ethnographic approach is going to be quite relevant. And I think technically speaking, if we try to speak that ethnography deals with what? It is basically writing about the people, and the basic idea in that sense of course is that we have to speak about that ethnography is basically the notion of the people in terms of the meaning makers. We try to emphasize upon how the people interpret the social world, and also we try to see that how they try to collaborate in terms of construction and maintenance of the cultural meaning. So, all these aspects in that sense are part and parcel of the human being, and we have to see that ethnographic understanding in that sense is going to be quite crucial. I think technically speaking, ethnography, which is basically derived from the ancient Greek word which means writing on the people, is basically trying to speak about the fact that it can be narrated through the film, documentaries, and the audio visuals. Like whatever we are doing in terms of recording in that sense can be treated as one form of ethnography, which is something which is put on record, which can be analyzed, interpreted in your own way whenever, wherever you are comfortable in that sense. So, that way we try to see that ethnography is basically researchers main mode of recording and analyzing the data in terms of the data which has been collected and generated during the field work. And for that, I think we have to see that the behavior and the personal impression and also the ethical aspect which with regard to the discipline is going to be quite crucial whenever we try to speak about the ethnography. And ethnography in that sense is basically seen as a research strategy that allows the researcher to explore and examine the culture and societies that are fundamental part of the human experiences. And for that, I think the most important thing is that the observations which plays a crucial role in terms of ethnography is going to be a starting point. The ethnography which we try to see, it basically conducts the research by interacting with the other human being, and that too in a natural setting, that normally we try to say it involves certain amount of conversation, interviews, seeing or observing certain, recording certain things in that sense in terms of rituals and practices. And apart from that, the complexity of the human lives and social interaction, they all are part and parcel of the ethnography, but these things are not done like the science in terms of the sterile laboratory arrangements, rather they are done in the field, in the situation which is quite natural in a life phenomenon. And that way I think we try to see that ethnography aims to study the life outside of the controlled environment, and that of course is where our strength lies, that we try to go beyond, we try to understand the situations which are of course are disturbing, which are very challenging in that sense as such, and we as a social scientist, how we are going to understand that, that is going to be important. So, ethnography basically is seen as a research strategy which basically covers under the disciplines of anthropology, sociology in that sense for that sake, and in some other disciplines also we try to speak about, in psychology also we try to speak about a bit of ethnography in that sense if required. And we have the classical scholars like Malinowski for that sake, even Predicards, Margaret Mead, Ruth Benedict, all of them were trying to speak about the issue of ethnography. I think the ethnographic work of Trobriand Islanders and also of the Nuer or of the Samoa tribe, all these things in that sense have been studied by these scholars, and they were all seen as a wonderful ethnographer. But the main thing is that how this methodology is going to be crucial or attractive, because it is basically the qualitative approach in the social sciences which makes the things more meaningful. And ethnography basically is seen as what I can say, an armchair understanding about the facts. In that sense, it basically provides a valuable contribution to the social science, and the whole idea in that sense of course is that it has certain amount of rigorous field visits. In that sense, it involves certain amount of written and analyzed understanding about the field in that sense, and it basically aimed in acquiring a deeper knowledge about the social community or the individuals which are basically part and parcel of the specific situation. So, this knowledge is considered to be deep when we try to see the subject which is examined in terms of the complex connections, and there I think the ethnography lies at the heart of the social science, because it tries to speak about the in depth, holistic and naturalistic study of the phenomenon, and by doing that I think it tries to put many things in that sense into connect. It tries to deal with the issue of the race, it tries to deal with the issue of ethnicity, it tries to deal with the aspect of gender, it tries to deal with the aspect of stratification, the institution of social, political, religious and the commercial nature. So, that way I think it is basically seen as a micro process which tries to involve or which try to take into consideration the interpersonal interaction in terms of the specific field situation, and that is where we try to see that social and the political scientists are basically concerned with the dynamic understanding of the interaction, and that basically is the art of ethnography, that it provides an approach for recording and analyzing the data in terms of a flexible situation. Friends, I think this is where we try to see that ethnography as an approach which is basically seen in a naturalistic phenomenon. The idea in that sense is that what we have to study is the behavior, the habitual context in that sense, and which of course is different from the so called laboratory situation. And what is more important is that ethnography research is holistic in nature, because it tries to see each and every aspect of the human life, and that way we try to